everybody to Climate Matters. My co-leader is not with us today. Jenny's had to send apologies. But Brenda is working with me today, so hopefully the meeting will be fairly smooth. I'd like to extend a really warm welcome to our new members. I've seen John Ellison on screen. Welcome to John. I don't know if we have Manon Roberts or Petra Gallagher, but they're the other two new members who've joined since last month. We'll arrange a new members meeting again soon. So if there's anybody here who's a relatively new member but not managed to get to one, let me know if you'd like to come to the new member meeting, because it explains a lot more about how this group works, because it's slightly unusual compared to many of the interest groups online. We have some updates for you before we hear Ian's news. And after that, we will be, we hope, hearing a speaker. Brenda's keeping a careful eye out because usually we haven't been told the name of the person who's speaking to us today, but I'm sure it will all be fine. Catherine, can I hand over to you, please, to talk about the national magazine for the U3A called U3A Matters. They nicked their name from Climate Matters, I reckon.
Yes, I must say I was quite surprised and quite pleased because when I first opened it and I saw my bit, I didn't bother to turn over the page and realize it was actually 4 pages, which is quite remarkable. I remain irritated when I went through the rest of the magazine at how many advertisements there were for holidays requiring flying.
Mhm.
And I think that is something we need to take up with not just the magazine, but with the U3A. And obviously they've got contracts with companies. But I think we could argue that there are now so many good companies who are doing very good holidays without flying. We ought to be pushing for that and maybe writing to the editor and saying, or not just the editor, actually, the chair, the new chair about this thing, because pressure from below can work, and I think it's worth it. And there was also a comment, quite rightly, about offsetting in the text of the article, not the bit that Joe or I wrote, but their editorial. And I must say, offsetting to me makes my flesh crawl. I think there are ways one can do it. And when I did have to fly many years ago, I just gave a large contribution to the Woodland Trust, which felt like a much better thing to do to a charity which is doing good things with trees rather than these cons. And I do believe the offsetting things are probably mostly cons. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody's got about that, about the article, not just my bit, but all the rest of it. Answer came the none.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Okay.
join the call. Can you just tell me a little more about what I just missed, please? Because I fly regularly and feel very guilty about it, but on the basis that the flight would be going anyway, consider that it's better for me to be on that airplane to be incurring additional carbon emissions. So I just wondered if you could just very briefly tell me, or can you provide a link in the chat maybe to the article you were referring to?
Well, it's in the magazine. It's this thing, Taking the Green Route.
Okay, lovely.
The current edition of the magazine.
Excellent. I'll check that out later. Thank
It
you.
is challenging, this whole thing. I mean, I am no longer flying. I'm not going to fly again.
Well, we have a house. We have a house in France, unfortunately, which is very close to Toulouse Airport, and I'm setting it up as a green as a green home. We're just putting in a composting toilet, and solar panels and other bits and pieces going on. But and there's
well, I'm going to Toulouse myself by train this summer.
Right. Okay. Well, but it's so expensive and takes such a long time compared to the direct flight from Gatwick for us, which is just down the road from us.
Well, I am fortunate that I live very close to Pancras Station, which does make a difference. But I'm going to Berlin as well by train. I'm just doing it.
Sounds wonderful, but we'll talk about that later, maybe. Sorry.
Laurie, I think maybe we need to have a session on that topic at another time.
Yes, please.
Um, I'm going to move on to Linda Creed next to talk to us about the toolkit element of the website. We're very fortunate in having a page on the Climate Advisors section of the website. So our materials are all open for anybody to have a look at. And the toolkit is particularly useful. So Linda, over to you.
Okay, I've shared my screen. I hope you can see that.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, excellent. This is a site you may not look at, but you need to because it's really, really good. It's the Climate Change and Environment site, which is set up by the subject leader. But what I want to look at today is the toolkit. Now, this is put together in 2022, and it's really designed for people who are setting up a new group. It's very beneficial for people who don't have a group or who are group leaders already and have forgotten the basics or need a bit more information. So I quickly look at it. It's in this section on the Climate Change website under Toolkit. And what it's doing is helping people to get started. So at the moment, I'm a group leader. If I weren't a group leader, I'd want to know, what do I have to do to start up a group? This could be any group. And then, so what types of meetings would I want to hold? Are there any case studies I can look at? Can people tell me what they're doing? And what sort of topics would I want to discuss? So if we look at getting started, this is actually starting up any group. This is the requirements, the U3A requirements for starting up any group within the U3A, not just climate change or environment. So I won't talk you through this. You can have a look for yourself, but it talks about the handbook, what you need to do in terms of keeping registers, keeping administration, and making sure that you're following the finance policy for your particular group. So that's to get you started. And then, well, what sort of meetings would I want to hold? So meetings that people have suggested here are a book club. People read a book and then go and talk about it, or everybody reads the same book and talks about a different paragraph of it, that type of thing. Or running a project between the group, having discussions. I think discussions are a normal part of any group anyway. Hybrid meetings, not sure how well they work. The technology can be a bit difficult in those, but they're just a few types of meetings that we thought people would actually become engaged in. And what we're looking for is for people to keep refreshing our information. So if anybody's holding any other types of meetings other than these, if you could let me know, that'd be brilliant, or Nick. Nick is the person who put this all together. He's project manager. And each of the pages on this is owned by a member of a team who put it all together in the first place. It was a big piece of work, and we relied on people from the groups around the country to help us on this. And it's ongoing. We're constantly trying to keep it updated. So we're relying on anybody who has a look at it to say, oh, I don't think that's quite up to date, and let us know. There's a page owner at the top of each page you can contact. So that's the types of meetings. What else would we want to know? So let's have a look at some case studies. So what sort of meetings are people holding? We have a look at Hampstead, which is one we know because it's Catherine's meeting. So you're on screen, Catherine. This is what Catherine's meeting does, the format of it, some of the topics it's covered. They started in 2019. And then you can go on to other different groups. What sort of things are they talking about? What are they doing? And then if you want any more, if you're really interested in something one group has done, you can always click on the contact details and send them an email and say, oh, can I ring you? Can you talk to me about this, etc. So it's a very good way of getting to know what other groups are doing and refining what your group is going to do, or enhancing what your group is doing. So let's go back to the top. And what have we got after the case studies? We've got topics here. These are a little bit out of date. So if anybody has any more interesting things or more general things to put on here, that would be interesting. We broke this down into act locally, think globally, to give people ideas of what to do, what to look at, what topics to cover. And it's just a broad brush approach, I suppose. But it was just to get a group going, basically. I haven't, with my group, I haven't covered all of this. I've gone off of tangents here, there, and everywhere. But I think it's quite good to give it a scope for what you can do. So that's basically what the group was about. Now, in conjunction with this, there was the resources. Now, I know Nick went through the resources last time, but it's worth noting that these are very good to actually help with a group. And at the last meeting, Nick was asking for somebody to take over the films section of this. Let me just show you what we've got in terms of films on here. So it's a question of adding to the films. Sorry, I've lost for words for a moment. Reviewing it, that's the word I was looking for, reviewing it. So, and unfortunately, we had a volunteer. We had Heather Haydock. I don't know if she's on the call today, but she is.
I'm on the call.
Oh, well done, well done. Thank you so much for volunteering. It's great to get volunteers. So Heather's going to have a look at the films rather, and we've got somebody else updating the books. And also at the summer school, I think there's going to be an exercise about bringing books together. So the book section will be updated from that. And now I've got the job of looking at the tips and seeing if we can make that a bit more streamlined, if you like. So basically, that's all I wanted to say about the toolkit. It's for new groups, basically, but it's good for existing groups, for the leaders to go back and have a look at what's available. There's loads of information here which is available. Any questions, anybody? No, I've stunned you all into silence, have I? Excellent.
Very good. There's a question from Charles, I think.
Oh, Charles, yes.
Yes, do you have anything on ecological footprints as opposed to carbon?
I don't think so.
So where do I get to that?
Can I put that question to Nick, because he would be better placed to answer that. He knows what's in here from start to finish, whereas I'm not completely sure. So you're looking at ecological
footprint.
Charles, the other person who might be able to help is the actual subject advisor.
That's a good point, yes.
So where am I going with this query? To the subject advisor?
Can I put it through Nick first of all?
Right, okay. Have you got my email address?
No, but I'm sure I can find it.
Do you want me to put it in the chat?
Oh, yes, please.
I'll do that. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Can I say, can I add something there?
Yep.
I mean, it's quite possible that subject advisor isn't knowledgeable about eco footprints. We did have a session on it last time, and I'll just put into the chat, look up Global Footprint Network. You'll find their website very easily, and there's a wealth of information there.
Thank you. Linda, are you able to stop sharing for us?
I am, yes.
Okay, I'm going to move the meeting on, if that's okay with everybody, and turn to Brenda, who's just going to update us on how we're using social media to communicate with each other.
Oh, right. We basically have a presence in two different platforms, in Facebook and WhatsApp. We set up the Facebook group as a closed group, which means that if you apply to join that, only other people in the group can see what you say. Somebody surfs for it and tries to find it, they'll be told, no, you can't go in here, it's a closed group. So the closed group is, there's got about 40 members from our group, and people use it to share articles they've found, news articles, things from Greenpeace, whatever. And sometimes it prompts a discussion and sometimes not. People use those to share further no, you can't share it further, to find the link and go and have a look at it with their own groups or whatever. So if you are a user of Facebook, then you can apply to join the group. So you will be able to find it in the Facebook, in the land of Facebook, if you put it in as a search, and then it'll pop up in Joe and Mary's lists, and it'll say, oh, so-and-so wants to join the group. They will then check that you are a member of this group and then admit you, and away you go. When we started to take part in various marches and events, we needed another format in which to be able to communicate quickly and easily, to say, yeah, we're at Waterloo Bridge, you'll find us by the coffee shop, that kind of thing. And that was how our WhatsApp group started. If you would like to be in the WhatsApp group, you will need to email me with your mobile telephone number, and then I can add you, and I'll pop my email in the chat in a minute. The WhatsApp group, however, has grown both in terms of members and the scope of what it does. We have some people who are in the WhatsApp group who are not in the Facebook group, so they use it a slightly different way to share information, just make a comment about something they've seen in the news. And on those occasions where we are all meeting up somewhere, we say, please, everybody, keep out of the WhatsApp for now, because we want to use it for its main and original purpose for a week or so. And that seems to work fine. So you're very, very welcome to join either or both of those groups and find lots of interesting from your U3A friends in your feed. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brenda. A very brief update on the summer school. In the magazine that Catherine showed us, U3A Matters, we also had a mention under the list of all the summer schools on offer this year. And from that, we've managed to fill our spaces. So most of the people going to summer school are from this group, but we have a few from other U3As as well. It's brilliant that we're full. It's the planning group is now moving into the next stage of the planning and really getting going on who's doing what, and the finer details. We also are very pleased to say that on the Sunday we are expecting a visit from the chair of the U3A, Alan Walmsley. So that will be a really good connection to make. So just so happy that he wants to come and see us. And back to Brenda to tell us a little bit about the extra Climate Matters session that we put on this month.
Okay, so we ran a bit of an experiment for this month. Several of you had said, oh, you know, the film, The 6 Inches of Soil, we should be seeing it, we should be talking about it. So we didn't want to try and do it within the confines of one of these meetings, so we set it up slightly differently and told you all when this was going to happen. And sent you a link so that you could then stream the film, which of course you did have to pay for, watch the film as many times as you wanted, and then join the discussion group. The discussion group went really, really well. We had 9 people on the call and 3 or 4 people sent their apologies. So that showed us that there was definitely a bit of an appetite for doing something like this. I think most people found the film very thought-provoking. Some had seen it before, etc. And we had a really good, solid hour of discussion, which was really nice to just completely devote that much time to a discussion, which I don't think we've ever really done before. So the other thing that happened links with what I about a moment ago about the WhatsApp group, sprung into action with an absolute stream of thoughts and comments and links to other things, people sharing their ideas, which was fantastic. So all in all, I think we felt that was, as a format, a useful thing to do and something we would consider again in the future.
Thank you very much, Brenda. I'm going to do something slightly different to usual now, in that we're about to go into Ian's news feature, but we will not be having any questions after that, because out of courtesy to our speaker, Rebecca, who's on the call now, she's expecting to start at 10:30, and I'd really like to keep to that timetable for her if we can. So, Ian, on to you, but with no questions.
Thanks. Thanks, Ellie. Let's go to slideshow. Yeah. So some news items for this month. Global temperature rise. You can see from the graph the temperature is still going up. We had El Nino last year, and we were expecting this rise, but this year we got La Nina, which sucks heat out of the atmosphere in the Pacific Ocean, and we were expecting it to fall, but in fact it's still rising, which is a little bit worrying. So the temperature of the planet is rising rather quicker than we were expected. It's heading up. It's basically heading up towards 3 degrees by the end of the century at the current rate. And obviously the politics at the moment is not really helping. So that's kind of a main point. Moving on from that, clean energy costs are coming down, which is good. Globally, we're expecting them to come down 2 to 11%, depending on what the product is this year. So that's good news. UK land use, in order to get to net zero by the 2050, we're expecting to lose about 9% of agricultural land. That'll be more the sort of low quality land for things like solar farms, wind farms, new towns, that sort of thing. So that's on the government website. But the main agricultural land, the most productive, will be protected, which is good. UK flood defences, the government's going to spend an extra £250 million over the next few years to protect us, which is, I think it's essential because we are seeing some increasing number of storms, obviously very slow sea level rise, more and more storms. The Environment Agency estimates there's 6.3 million homes are at risk of flooding due to climate change, rising to 8 million by the middle of the century. So they can see a reason for doing that. Small nuclear reactors have pretty much got a go ahead. There's a review in the summer, to finalise what the rollout plans for small nuclear reactors are. These are much lower cost, low carbon energy sources. We're expecting the UK energy nuclear to go up from about 15% to 25% by the middle of the century. So a lot of this will be these small nuclear reactors. The main problem with those is what you do with the nuclear waste. At the moment, it's going to Sellafield and being buried as far underground as possible, but I think that policy needs updating. But anyway, small nuclear reactors are definitely going to go ahead. NDC submissions should have been in last month for every country around the world. The NDC is basically saying how they're going to reduce their carbon, but 80%, 83% of countries haven't actually published their NDC. The NDCs will feed into the climate change meeting in November this year in South America. So they should all be in then, but I see that there seems to be a little bit of a reluctance for countries to publish their NDCs. And the Trump situation is not helping with that. Talking about Trump, drill baby drill. The UN climate summit that we had last year ended with an obligation for all countries to transition away from fossil fuels. They didn't say how fast, but they said, it should be going down. But in fact, we're not seeing that. In fact, carbon emissions are still rising each year. So that's heading in the wrong direction. Partly driven by the politics, I would say. Japan has decided to introduce nuclear reactors, which is a step forward for them, so they're relatively low carbon. They had the Fukushima problem about 15 years ago, but they're now going back to nuclear, which is good. Glacier melting is being recorded The glaciers, the on-land glaciers, such as in the Himalayas and the Swiss mountains, are melting faster and faster each year. And this is obviously important to countries like India, where most of the water comes on the two main rivers, which feed from the Himalayas. So I think India is going to feel the pressure of water shortages over the next 10 or 15 years or so. Once that ice is melted, then you're basically losing that flow, or it becomes very sort of inconsistent. Increase in Europe rail travel, which we've just been talking about. There's been an announcement, High Speed and GetLink have signed an agreement to provide more trains into Europe from St. Pancras, going from sort of 1,800 passengers an hour to 5,000 passengers an hour as an alternative to flying. And this is going to Northern Europe and Southern Europe. So we should be encouraging people. And if they can get the pricing right, that would definitely encourage people to use the train, which is good. Brazil is hosting COP30 end of this year. And at the same time, they've actually joined OPEC as an oil-producing country. So that's a bit of a contradiction. So, you know, we're getting sort of mixed policies coming out from these countries. Rising sea levels. There's an island in the Pacific which is advertising citizenship in order to move its population to higher ground. And this is the sort of thing that we're going to see increasingly in the Pacific Islands as they gradually get flooded. And so we expect to see a lot more of that going forward. UK net zero economy is growing quite fast. It's growing probably 3 times the rate of the rest of the economy, which I think is good news. So that's I think that's quite positive on sort of UK net zero. If other countries could do the same, I think we'd be in good shape. But what we're seeing is the US is backtracking, and India is definitely not doing a great deal. So that really needs. But anyway, the UK is actually doing reasonably well on that. Just biodiversity. There was an agreement in the Montreal Conference to protect the 30% of land and sea for nature conservation. Needless to say, that hasn't happened because the countries that have signed up to it have now realized it's quite expensive. So not a lot of countries have signed up to that. But there is a biodiversity conference happening now in Rome, so we'll await the output of that. US agriculture. Under the Trump regime, farmers and environmental groups are suing the US Agriculture Department over its decision to remove references to climate change from its website. You know, so Trump is basically saying there is no climate change, and government regulations have been told to remove climate change from the documentation. The farmers, on the other hand, actually need it, you know, because they do need to do the transition because the weather is changing. So they're taking the US government to court on that one. And good luck with that. Oil company green investments. Yeah, I should say BP, Shell, a lot of these big oil companies are moving away from their green investments at the moment, which is very sad to see. So it does seem to be a sort of thing which is happening. And I think that's it. There we are, really. There we go.
Ian, fascinating as always. Thank you very much for your talk. And thank you, everybody, for the comments you've put into the chat. As we move towards the speaker, could I just remind people this is the section where we do not use the chat so that people can really concentrate on what the speaker is saying. So I'm going to hand over to our Speaker Secretary, Brenda Ainsley, to introduce Rebecca.
Hi, Ellie, please can you enable Rebecca to share her screen? So everyone, we are delighted today to have Rebecca come to speak to us from the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland. In a nutshell, this is about how climate change is affecting wild animals, both here and abroad. Rebecca will pop into the chat the question that we will pose you for your breakout groups at the end of her presentation. Presentation is called The Time Is Now, and I'm handing over to Rebecca to do her stuff.
Wonderful. Just checking you can hear me okay?
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, perfect. I will just share my screen.
Lovely.
Wonderful, perfect. Thank you so much for inviting me along and for the lovely introduction as well. My name is Rebecca. I work for the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, and I'm based at Edinburgh Zoo. I started off my journey at the zoo as a volunteer and really kind of fell in love with a lot of the work that they do, and decided I wanted to work for them in any capacity I could, until eventually getting to the department which I wanted. My talk today is going to be focused on the impact climate change is having on animals, so less about the science itself, and more about the consequences of what we can see here at the zoo, be it Edinburgh Zoo or the Highland Wildlife Park, and the impacts that it's having. First off, who are we? We are the Royal Zoo, as I said, the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland. We are a wildlife conservation charity, and we were established in 1909. And the way we raise funds to do all of the work that we do, based here in Scotland and across the world, is by operating 2 zoos. We are able to raise a huge amount of funds to be able to do all the work that we do. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to connect with people. As I'm sure you are probably well aware, it's really difficult to make people care about the climate, because they can't always see the consequences in front of them. And likewise, people don't particularly care about animals. If I'm talking about a certain species, it's a lot easier for them to connect to them and relate to them if they see the animal in front of them, see their personalities and see how wonderful and delightful that they are. And having these 2 zoos allows us the chance to be able to share really important messages, so that hopefully we'll be able to create a world where nature is protected, valued and loved. So I thought I would start off by introducing you to, as I mentioned, some of our animals. This is one of my favourites. This is Ronnie. Ronnie is one of 5 of our teenage boys at the zoo. He is a Nubian giraffe. They're an endangered species. Ronnie is a fantastic ambassador for giraffes. They are wonderful animals, and I'm not entirely sure what he's doing in these series of pictures other than being a teenage boy. Him along with our other boys are always up to mischief, and Ronnie in particular is our chief troublemaker. He has broken a door, he has broken a gate. My personal favourite is, whilst the founders of the Giraffe Conservation Foundation were giving a talk to our keepers, Ronnie took offence that he wasn't invited and decided to break one of the fences. They are full of personality, and people don't always realise just how endangered giraffes are. There's a lot of other animals that get a lot more attention, but giraffes are struggling. Since the 1700s, there's been a huge decrease in giraffe numbers. There's now only around 117,000 of them left in the wild, and 7 countries have declared them extinct from their country. We call it a silent extinction because a lot of time other animals get more attention. For example, for every 1 giraffe, there are 4 elephants. And yet public perception we find is often that people think elephants require a lot more intention in terms of numbers. This map shows you their historic range. So previously the entire habitat range for all species of giraffes, and this is it today. The green area is now where you will find giraffes. That is their current habitat range. So again, this was their previous historic range of giraffes, this lovely green area, and now this is the area that giraffes are confined to. Climate change is one of the big reasons for this, as it's having huge consequences for animals, not just giraffes. Right the way across the planet, we're seeing animals being hit hardest by climate change, and there's so many impacts of it. Here's just a small list. I could easily spend all day talking about the impacts of climate change, and I just wanted to highlight just a quick few. We have the destabilizing temperatures. So with temperatures rising and changing, animals don't always have time to adapt. It takes them thousands of years to be able to evolve to changing environments. Sloths, as I've put in the picture, this is Nico, is a fantastic example of this. Sloths require only a certain temperature range to be able to survive. If it gets too hot or too cold, they are not able to cope. Because they are so slow and perfectly evolved to be as energy efficient as possible, they can't properly regulate their own body temperature, and they require their external environment to be able to provide it. If it gets too hot, too cold, they suffer as a result. And as well as rising temperatures also increase sea levels, which again causes habitat loss. More extreme weather events. I know, especially here in Scotland, we've been battered by storms since the start of the year, and those extreme weather events are more than likely to continue as the climate continues to change. The shrinking of water sources, that's a huge one. In particular, that's one that affects giraffes. It takes animals, as I mentioned, a really long time to be able to adapt to get their moisture and the water that they need from their food. And giraffes are no exception. Not having a reliable or steady source of water dramatically impacts their livelihood and their ability to survive. Another impact of climate change is the animal migration, so changing fish patterns, changing bird migrations has a huge impact. There's a lot of rescue centres in Australia that are finding, and New Zealand, that are finding penguins turn up on random beaches that are definitely not meant to be there. I was in the Falkland Islands, and they had talked about how they had found a young emperor penguin washed up onto the shore of the Falkland Islands. Again, a juvenile just following the fish and their changing patterns. So again, it has a huge impact on them. And the two that I'm really going to focus on today is the plant growth and seasonal changes, and because we have direct evidence and impact of that based on our experiences. This is a wonderful photo of wild chimpanzees in the Budongo rainforest in Uganda. We have been one of the lead partners out there for the Budongo Conservation Field Station since 2005, and we are really involved in all the work that goes on there. And it's part of the reason why we have chimpanzees at Edinburgh Zoo, is because they're fantastic ambassadors for their wild counterparts. And we work hand in hand to talk about research and learning and sharing what we know. And one of the things that they have found in Uganda is the impact the rising temperature, the impact plant growth is having on wild chimpanzees. As temperatures change, it's changing when flowers and plants season, when they come ripe. Chimpanzees have a very varied diet, including insects, but predominantly it is fruit and leaves. So I've made a really kind of simplified model just to show you a bit about how this has impacted them. In Uganda, they have a wet season and a dry season. Predominantly the wet season, they get quite a lot of fruit. And in the dry season, it's quite a lot of flowers. Chimpanzees have got their diet very carefully planned throughout the year, so they always have food. And so this is just a very quick mock-up of what it could potentially look like. This is in perfect balance. Never at any point within the seasons are the chimpanzees left without. But as temperatures increase and as they continue to change, that changes when they will flower, and it creates gaps. Suddenly, the chimpanzees are going without, and they are seeing that in the Budongo rainforest. Plants and fruit are seasoning when they are not typically meant to, which is leaving gaps in their diet. If this continues over time, this could have serious consequences, not just for chimpanzees, but everything that lives in the rainforest. The rainforest is in a perfect balance, and these gaps create quite dangerous opportunities for things to go without. If animals are not resourceful, and for some species that are maybe not quite as intelligent as chimpanzees, that could start to cause problems. Going long periods without food could have detrimental impacts on their well-being. And it is something that our team in Uganda are currently trying to combat, and are currently trying to work with local communities to see if they can help all animals make sure that they are always have a reliable source of food. The other one I would highlight is seasonal changes, because this is one that's particularly relevant here at the zoo. We have got over 140 penguins at the zoo. They are one of my personal favourite animals. And just now is a really exciting time of year, because it's breeding season. This is one of our wonderful penguins, Muffin, with her baby. I believe this baby ended up being called Donut. You can sense the theme. Our keepers have to work incredibly hard, and have noticed over the past couple of years with breeding seasons. We've been breeding penguins for many years, and they have noticed in particular it is becoming more and more difficult to manage the seasonal changes. Our set seasons of winter being cold, summer being warm are no longer the case. As you've kind of mentioned about in the news, in your news section, things are changing much more rapidly. And we found over the past couple of years, during the breeding season, where once it was a bit cooler and stable for the penguins, it's becoming increasingly hot. We tend to have a heat wave towards the in springtime, and that's been having a detrimental impact on our penguins. Penguins in the wild, just like in the zoo, tend to have their babies just at the end of winter into spring, so that there's plenty of fish available for them. They are not anticipating heat waves. A lot of our penguins are incredibly good parents, and don't want to potentially risk their baby being overheated, and so will often we found, in particular last year, there was a really bad heat wave. Our penguin parents didn't want to leave the nest in order to make sure their babies were safe, even at the detriment of them overheating. Our keepers have to work really hard to provide things like sprinklers. Last year, we brought in van loads of ice every day around the nest site. We have sage shales. So an active part of our keepers' role is now trying to actively combat the seasonal changes that climate change is causing. And it's not just us at the zoo. The Highland Wildlife Park up in the Highlands are also reporting that summers are a lot hotter, and their keepers are having to come up with more creative ways to keep their animals cool, be it through, lollipops for the polar bears and freezing, making blood icicle lollipops for the tigers. We are finding at our zoo, and not just our zoo, zoos across the UK are finding issues with trying to keep their animals cool, and conversely, keeping their animals hot. So I thought I'd show you a very cute photo of this is Nessie, one of our penguins, being kept cool. When we did have to bring in loads and loads of ice, and conversely, winters are becoming particularly harsh too. This is one of our newest little arrivals. This is baby Haggis. She is our pygmy hippo. We would have hoped by this point to already have had her outside a couple of weeks ago, but because of how turbulent the seasons have been, we've not been able to. So she has been kept inside for a bit longer, just so that we know she was warm. It is taking a lot more effort from our keepers to be able to manage that properly, because the weather and the seasonal changes we're experiencing are becoming a lot more unpredictable. So I have your breakout rooms now, and we've got 2 questions for you to be able to discuss in your groups. And I've just got the slides here. So what actions can we as a group and individuals take to help wildlife with the climate change and its impact? And then the second one to discuss in your groups is, do you know of any conservation projects that had a positive impact on wildlife? So those are my questions for you. I believe we're going to organise the breakout rooms now, and then we'll bring you back and we'll just have a quick look.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was absolutely captivating. Ellie is going to be in charge of dividing you up into groups. We've got 37 of you right now, Ellie. So there we go. You'll see your invites on your screens. How long have we got, Ellie?
Shall we do about 20 minutes?
Okay, lovely. A lot of you've got quite good at using your electronic hands, so if you do have a point you want to make in speaking as opposed to in the chat, raise your hand using the reactions button, which may be at the bottom of your screen or might be somewhere else if you're using an iPad or some such. If you're on a PC, if you just hover across the bottom of your screen, you'll see where you can open your chat, where you can react by raising a hand, etc. It just means that we see you if you do that. When there's nearly 40 people on the call, probably 30 of you aren't visible to us, even if you're waving madly. Little things that are starting to creep in there then. Lots of things that are creeping in. It's a flood. Right, okay. So people talking here, Ruth mentioning there about local conservation projects such as beavers. You will have a local wildlife trust. Ruth there is in Derbyshire, and they are a great place to start for information. As Mary says, there are things we can do for the wildlife in our own gardens and our own locality by putting out water. If only water, that's a great thing to do. Food or nesting boxes and things. Or open it out a lot wider. Talk to your MP about how the whole sort of machine of fossil fuel addiction is wrecking habitats and asking them to be active in that area. Local protection again. And as Catherine says, being really positive. There are good things going on here through local groups.
These are all absolutely amazing ideas, and I was popping in and out of some of the breakout rooms listening to discussions, and it was great to hear everybody's ideas.
Growing of trees, providing habitats and cooling if things get hot. Trees are marvelous protection from that. And back to the 6 inches of soil and no tilling and lightly tilling of the land. Rebecca, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
So how able does a group like the RZSS feel to lobby government about climate to actually try and get to the heart of the problem rather than, just protecting individual animals in enclosures. How do we actually go to the wider problem here? Are you able to do that?
Yeah, so I was going to say I don't particularly have a lot of influence in that in my current role. There are other team members in the zoo who do. Particularly the CEO is in constant communication with MPs. I mentioned in one or two of the breakout rooms I was in, RZSS is part of a wider organisation called BIAZA, which is the British and Irish Association for Aquariums and for Zoos and Aquariums. They frequently are in communication with MPs about changes, about climate change, and about the issues and impacts that animals are having to try and get more protected species. One of our really big conservation projects in the past couple of years has been in Scotland, including the releasing of beavers, the reintroductions of beavers back into Scotland, and the release of thousands of pine hoverflies, and last year and this year, the releasing of wildcats back into Scotland. All of these conservation projects require direct communication with the government. So we are in talks with them, because often we're saying we need to release pine hoverflies back into Scotland. We list the reasons why, and climate change and the impacts that it's having is mentioned. So they are aware, and we definitely, I know our CEO in particular is not shy on giving his opinion to them when they've made changes that have directly affected us. But it's not just us. Zoos right the way across the UK who are a part of BIAZA are in communication with them. Some of the zoos have done some fantastic lobbying for it. The Royal Zoological Society of London in particular, and Chester Zoo. Chester Zoo is very vocal.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. I wonder if you could please pop into the chat for us the link to that overarching group and where you go. If you're going to visit a zoo, where do you check up to find out? If you can pop something into there.
Yeah, of course I can do.
We've got two hands up. I'm going to go to Catherine first.
I just wanted to, we had a discussion about the differences between the Soil Association, organic farming, and regenerative agriculture, and that there are some problems about regen, which has become the sort of buzzword, because they're still using some pesticides and all the rest of it. And we thought that that was something that at some point that needs to be put together because I'm a supporter of the Soil Association. I'm also very interested in this regen stuff, but I feel as though they need to come together a bit more.
Rebecca, I don't know if you can address that.
Yeah. I think the more that organisations work together, the better. As much as I would love RZSS to be able to do everything, there is absolutely no way we as a charity can do it all. We heavily rely on our partnerships with other organisations. For example, like I mentioned, the pine hoverflies and the wildcats, we depend on the expertise of the rangers in the Cairngorms National Parks, because they know those mountains like the back of their hands. Their ability to track wildcats is unbelievable. And we require their expertise because we don't have that. So the more organisations are prepared to work together, the better. It's not just I personally, Rebecca Parr, can resolve the entire issue of climate change. It has to be a united front. So the more we can work together, the better.
Thank you. Charles, you have your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, we didn't pick up the correct questions, but I suppose of what we discussed that was material for the questions was a recognition that having a baby causes a family to engage more, particularly mothers, but there was a view that grandparents also engage more. So to recognise that's a particular group that one could target seemed to be a way forward. There also was a very strong view that, I suppose in the same way that the Archers was used by the UK government for propaganda after the Second World War. There was an idea that to use Coronation Street. So I guess one has to now write to the chief executive of the television company that makes the programme. Might be an action to take.
You, Rebecca?
Yeah, it's I was going to say, to be honest, I have found this. I do quite a lot of speaking. It's my job, and I have been absolutely amazed at the level of engagement from. I mean that like response. It's just the level of awareness and yeah, I've not quite had a group where I've been as impressed.
Oh, thank you. Well, actually,
yeah,
I don't think
it's amazing.
I don't think we've ever had as much response as this in the chat.
Oh, great.
This
I was going to
is-
say your insights,
Oh,
your
yeah,
questions.
yeah.
It's honestly, it's amazing. It's incredible. I think that this is just been hearing all your discussions and things like that. It's just amazing. All the projects that you know of and your desires for everybody to work together is just absolutely incredible. This has been great. If you ever would like me to come back, I volunteer. This was wonderful. I can give you more debate. Yeah, this is.
Yes. Yeah, I
I'm
think
really impressed by all of your insights and knowledge. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's coming through in the chat is, we are in general a slightly older group, not exclusively, but in general. And more than a few people have commented in there about, their children and grandchildren, and someone there, Nicole, saying there about taking his grandchildren to Edinburgh Zoo this summer. So that's wonderful. I know in my own group, there was a fair bit of discussion about, well, if you're feeling generous, who do you decide to give your money to? I'm just popping into the chat there now, the link to the RZSS. So if you have felt particularly enthusiastic about what Rebecca's had to say today, and you'd like to slip them half a crown, as Idris said earlier, there's your link to send you half a crown, should you wish to do so, but no pressure.
I would just like to say a huge thank you for inviting me along. The more people care about climate and want to help reverse, the more we'll be able to help, make a difference for animals. I thought I would end my slides on this adorable little pig. It's a Visayan warty pig. She's all grown up now, but there's fewer than 200 of them left in the wild. They're originally from the Philippines, and they often don't get the love and attention that they deserve because people prefer meerkats over adorable pig. But I've been so impressed by all of your discussions, by all of your insights, by the passion that you all have for the environment and for the climate. It's really, really incredible. A huge thank you for inviting me along, because your support and hearing what we do, it really does make a difference to all of the conservation projects that we have. And the fact that you wanted to learn a bit more about the impact that it's having on animals is incredible. So thank you so much for inviting me along. It really doesn't mean a lot to us that you care and that you want something. So a huge thank you. If you do want to know more about the specifics of what we do, so some of our conservation projects, then feel free to invite us along again. Or if you'd like us to give you more debate, like you have been having in your WhatsApp group about the polar bear fur, then let us know. We've got plenty armed. But a huge thank you for us for inviting us along and for caring about our animals as much as we do.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I know you have to leave us.
So if anybody does have any other questions that they would like answered, because obviously I don't have the time to do it just now, Brenda has my email, so you're more than welcome to message Brenda and I can collate some responses for you. But yeah, thank you so much for having us along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. We've got a few minutes for just sort of general questions or chat. And Ian, I see that your hand is up.
Oh yes, I was just thinking that the agricultural industry could do more to protect wildlife. I mean, if you go through a walk through the Suffolk countryside, you hear shotguns going off occasionally, so they're obviously shooting foxes or whatever. And I think that's the wrong thing to do. So I know that the government is encouraging reforestation, but I think the agricultural industry could, get on board with this and help us protect our wild species. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ellie, I have truly been bowled over with the chat today. It's incredible, isn't it? I've never seen us generate that much passion over something. We don't send out the chat anymore, people, because it's just another job for somebody else to do. But you can save the chat for yourself. If you go to the top of the chat where it says Climate Matters and you see the 3 little dots there, and open that up, the top one is Save Chat, and it will save it onto your computer. Or if you don't trust that, just simply copy and paste the whole thing into a Word document. So there's a wealth of great ideas in there, especially today. Ellie.
I'll just take the hand up from Nicole.
Hi there. Yeah, just on the topic of farmers and so on, and I'm sure there are many who care deeply about the environment, but I am familiar with although I've left the project now, but the local university at Stirling are proposing or are working towards putting in a lot of sensors in a local country park, which includes a loch, which actually used to be a reservoir, but is no longer a reservoir. For the area. The water quality in the loch, amongst other things, is deteriorating rapidly. It used to be a site of special scientific interest for wintering wildfowl, but they don't tend to come so much anymore because the fish are dying off. And the principal culprit of it is runoff from the farms as they dump tons and tons of nitrates and fertilizers on their land. So when they had the consultation meeting, the Stirling were kind of talking about putting in these sensors. One of the things sensors are going to have is water sensors. The farmers suddenly became quite agitated about the fact that we would be able to detect the quality of the water. And I don't know what had happened as a result of that. But my concern is that they then go to the powers that be and try and discourage these kind of things happening. The people in that area are clearly not as interested about the environment as they are more interested in maximizing their profits. And unfortunately, I think there are a lot of farmers who think along those lines. And I've read articles in various newspapers about the River Wye, is it? Which is almost dead.
Yeah.
Because of runoff nitrates at chicken farms, I think is a principal issue there.
Yes.
So it's a bit depressing, although we were trying to support the university to get these sensors installed, because the principal reason for the sensors was to provide data to community organizations and educational establishments, including the university, as well as local schools, who could then take this information and then start to analyze it and maybe come up with projects which were locally based to try and make improvements to the local environment, and that country park in particular. So it's just some information there.
I think Nicole's point as well does sort of highlight how much our consumer choices can have an impact. So if you are choosing organic food, you're giving more credence to those farmers, and more people are likely to turn organic. So don't forget the power of your pound in your pocket either. I don't remember who originally located that speaker. I know that Ian started the process of organising. It was Terry. Thank you so much. It proved quite an interesting topic with a really good response. And thank you so much, everybody, for your input today. Part of U3A is about tackling ageism. And I think her comments were interesting, that this is one of the most active, interested groups that she's spoken to. So don't let younger members of your family and your friends ever think that we are past it. Please do talk about what you've heard today. The people that you know, make sure the next generation down and the one after that are quite aware of what you're doing with your life. Our next meeting will be on the 28th of March, always the last Friday of the month. It sounds like a little bit of a controversial talk. It arose because people in this group were asking, what's the most climate friendly thing to do with my body when I pass on? Should I be buried? Should I be cremated? Or is there something else? So Brenda's found this speaker on the environmental aspects of death.
Good.
Will be sensitively presented, so please do come along and listen to that. There's 2 more national talks that might be interesting to you. 5th of March, Brenda is doing The Truth in Pen. And on the 12th of March is a national talk on sustainable train travel. So those are both very pertinent to what we've been talking about today. Our time is up. I hope that everybody has managed to capture the chat if they want to get all of those links. Or if you just click on one of those links, it will open on your computer so that you can follow it once we come off the Zoom. I wonder if the core group can just stay on for a moment, just to help evaluate today's session. And thank you very much, everybody, for all your contributions today. Well done.
Thank you.
Could we stop the recording, please, Teresa?